First of all, let's give another round of applause to the panel here and their passion and their amazing speeches. So I just would like to conclude by kind of wrapping up in terms of some of the themes that I've heard throughout the course of this forum. A forum series that we intend to continue this dialogue so that more and more individuals like yourselves, as well as others, could be participating in this process to bring about the unification of North and South Korea. I think the first theme is that we are at a historic opportunity. This challenge had been thrust upon the Korean people ever since the partitioning of the Korean homeland after liberation from Japan. I think I mentioned in my speech the failures even within U.S. policy, but also the entire global community, and that a tragedy was sought when that partition happened, because it basically separated a homogeneous people that had a common identity, culture, history that spanned 5 millennia. In one sense, we're a historic milestone in that history has come full circle. As someone whose family was directly involved in architecting the 1919 Declaration for Independence that our congressman read so eloquently, and as a family that had been involved in the pursuit for the unification of the two Koreas for as long as I could remember, this is something that is made even that much more bittersweet for me. In that in 2019, we're going to be celebrating the 100th year centennial of the 1919 independence movement. Why is this significant and why is this important? Because it captured the unadulterated dreams of the Korean people that was seeking liberation from Japanese colonial yoke and wanted to create a new republic that basically manifested the aspirations of Koreans from its founding, inspired by an ideal of 홍익인간, a belief that God had mandated to the Korean people to live for the benefit of all mankind. So I talk about this in my book, that throughout Korean history, this ideal informed the Korean people, developing a rich spiritual consciousness that allowed them to formulate and strengthen their sense of national identity and destiny. And that it was manifested in the 20th century in the liberation movement. And that is why 1919, March 1st, is so significant to the Korean people. Now, as Americans or as Westerners, you might not understand the rich history of Korea, but Kim Il-sung, the founder of North Korea, was part of the independence movement. I touch upon in my book, I talk about how Koreans seeking independence, they looked to different sponsors. So you had Koreans that looked to the United States as a sponsor, you had Koreans that looked to European nations as sponsors, and you had Koreans that looked to the Soviet Empire as sponsors. But their goal was to build a unified homeland that manifested the ideals upon which the Korean national identity was built. So if you look at North Korea still believes, or one of the key elements of the Juche ideology is that the Kim family goes all the way back, historically, to the founding mythology of Korea. Same thing in South Korea. The founding kind of philosophy of South Korea is the 홍익인간 idea. So this ideal is really the only unifying ideal that both North Korea and South Korea agrees on. One of the reasons why the book that I wrote in 2014 is so influential in Korea is that it put in, or it articulated what that dream is in a way that Koreans resonate with. So, before the writing of that book, remember, there was no terminology coined the Korean dream. This became the Korean dream. And I think one of the things that many of you gathered here, if you have read the book or if you have not read the book, I'd like to explain. It comes from hard-won lessons. You know, my father opened the door to North Korea in 1991 with that historic meeting with Kim Il-sung. There, it was from that point that the North started to engage the South, and that eventually, several years later, that South Korea and North Korea developed the Sunshine Policy. Now, the Sunshine Policy was, in one sense, for somebody who had been involved in the unification issue most of my life, was a tremendous, tremendous, hopeful achievement. However, when we look back in retrospect, it was a complete and utter failure. And the question is why? The reason why the Sunshine Policy failed was because the South, in terms of engaging the North, had no clear endgame plan. They had no strategy. They talked about dialogue. They talked about talking with the North, engaging with the North, and somehow by osmosis, by sunshine, that the North will collapse or will fold or will cooperate in some type of unified Korea. Well, the naivete of that is what really informed not only the writing of my book, The Korean Dream, but also the initiative called AKU. Now, I know that, especially I remember 2010, when I really started this movement for unification, I remember I had to do a lot of convincing to Koreans who believe that the only way that you're going to solve the unification process is basically dialogue between the two Koreas, meaning the two governments of Korea. I don't know how many times I explained to them, no. What's more important is actually a citizen-led grassroots movement that moves the governments of these two Koreas, that brings about the transformation of this peninsula to become a unified nation. We have to have a clear vision and dream that inspires all of us. At the same time, we need to develop a grassroots movement of citizen-led, average Koreans that pushes this process of unification forward. That became the epiphany behind the founding of Action for Korea United. Now, when I started that initiative in 2012, once again I was told it can't happen. Not in Korea, not in South Korea, because of the hyper-partisan politics and because of the innate class divide due to the archaic chaebol economic system. So most Koreans don't feel, although it is so-called a capitalist country, they do not feel opportunity. And it's because there's major structural problems within the Korean economy that does not allow average Koreans to participate in capital creation. That's another side story. But the key issue was, could a citizen-led grassroots movement exist in South Korea? Well, I think we made history. Because 5 years later, as we stand today, it is the largest coalition of religious, civic, NGOs, as well as the Korean government in Korea. And this is the first time in the history of modern Korea that such a coalition was ever created. Then I was told, there is a lot of young people who are going to be the future of Korea that does not want unification to happen because they think it's going to be too expensive. All these different reasons. Well, so in 2015, we launched the 1K concert, where we partnered with K-pop. Can you believe it? K-pop? We partnered with K-pop and the icons in the K-pop industry and the entertainment field to partner with us to educate the Korean young people about the importance and the relevance of unification for them and their future. Now, at that time, the big problem within the Korean economy right now is that there are so many educated, college-educated young people who cannot find a job. So among that demographic group, many of them were talking about hell choson, that South Korea is like hell. As our analyst pointed out, unification will be the economic stimulus not only of Korea, but the entire region. It will afford the opportunities that currently the South Korean economic system does not afford its young people. So, as I started to talk to these entertainment people in terms of the relevance of unification, they got it. Doesn't take that long, they get it. And from that point on, all the top K-pop groups, I can't name them, it's not my generation, but my children can, and probably your children can. All of them came on board. And the most famous producer and songwriter in Korea, he actually wrote the first unification theme song that is now, we created a whole new genre of songs in Korea, unification songs, and it was started from this 2015 event. Fast forward to 2017, in spring, when we had, once again, that concert in the Philippines. I was told that unification issue is not relevant beyond Korea. Well, we had the 1K concert in the Philippines. And there, 15,000 Filipino youth came to the Araneta Stadium, and they basically were chanting, "One Korea, the one dream, one Korea, one world," with the handful of Korean kids that flew from Korea to see this K-pop concert. It was televised by KBS to the Korean audience, as well as the global Korean audience through KBS International. But the thing that was most significant was that the Filipino youth identified with the cause of Korean unification. And this is significant. Our analyst here was talking about apartheid and how that became an international event that the world community had to condemn. Well, through events such as this, we found that yes, the human rights violations and the fact that the Korean people are united today is an issue that the global community can rally behind. And once you create that global consensus, and once you have the global community recognize that this is an issue that has to be resolved, then unification will come. That is why what happened recently with Trump's visit, with President Trump's visit to Asia, is so significant. Because it represents a departure, and this is especially to the Korean audience here. This is a significant departure in terms of American foreign policy towards Korea. If our Korean guests think that America's positioning is like it was a year ago, 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, vis-a-vis the Korean Peninsula, they need to rethink that. The calculus has completely changed with North Korea's nuclear program and their effort to have an ICBM that could hit the United States. As far as Americans concerned, this is a major issue that they have to resolve. So Trump's speech in front of the national parliament in Korea was significant in that for the first time in the history of Korea, the Korean issue is front and center in terms of American foreign policy. Up until now, Korea was always an afterthought. But now, as far as America's concerned, as far as the global community is concerned, the Korea issue is front and center, not only in terms of American foreign policy, but in terms of global security. So we have entered a period in time which is, I have to end this soon. So anyway, we have entered a time in which we have almost entered a perfect storm that something amazing can happen if truly the message gets out of the importance of unification. So I want to thank all of you for your participation, and I hope that you can join us in this cause for the peaceful unification of the Korean Peninsula. Thank you very much.